Picking up where we left off, we were discussing the name Yahweh and how in the Hebrew text, what you've got is the vowels from Adonai placed around the consonants for Yahweh as part of this device in the Hebrew Bible called kathib and kureh. Kathib is a term that just means the writings, and the kureh is what's supposed to be spoken in place of what's written. And mostly kathib and kureh has to do with updated pronunciation of pronouns and things like that. But what you've got with the name Yahweh as the most sacred name in the Bible, to avoid possibly blaspheming the name of Yahweh, you just don't say it. So that's why the vowel points are there. So what you've got, if you look in the syllabus, is you can see how the vowels from Adonai are placed on the consonants for Yahweh. But before I go into that, the significance of the name Yahweh is important because it's a derivative of the verb to be in Hebrew. So ultimately, when we see its origin in Exodus 3:14 and 15, when Moses asked, "Whom shall I say sent me?" essentially, the name is the existing one sent you. If you can say there is a first and primary attribute of God, if you could call it an attribute, that's a debate in theology, but existence is first and foremost the primary attribute of God because he has to first exist to have all the other attributes. And he eternally exists. He never began to exist, and he will never cease to exist. So it is interesting that when we think about God as the source of life and that he is life, yes, he's the eternally existing one as a person and as the ultimate living being who has always existed. So that's the concept and the basic definition of Yahweh. But let's dig a little bit deeper here and say, look, all right, here's the problem. If you've studied, the first few weeks of Hebrew, you find out about this kathib and kureh. And that's the problem, again, when people like the Jehovah's Witnesses, discover that, we've discovered the true name of God. It's actually Jehovah. It's not Yahweh, it's Jehovah. Well, that's what happens when people don't have the first 3 weeks of Hebrew and they think they're starting a new movement for God. They make lots of mistakes. So what you've got here, again, with the vowels, you've got the Adonai with the changing of the vowels. So you got the Yod, He, Wah, and the He, or YHWH in English. And then what you look at with the A sound becomes a short E sound and so forth based on open and closed syllable rules in Hebrew. But what you end up with, putting the vowels for Adonai instead of Yahweh, you end up with something that looks like Yehovah, which is not actually a Hebrew word. And that's significant because if you studied Hebrew, you know that Yehovah is not a Hebrew word. It's a combination of the consonants from Yahweh and the vowels from Adonai. So again, that's why when I talk with a Jehovah's Witness, I say, I only have 2 problems with the name Jehovah. And they say, well, what's that? And I say, well, the consonants and the vowels, okay? So they're looking at each other going, what? So, yeah, why? Because, well, probably, the Y pronunciation is proper because what you have is a Yod, not a J. Now, again, there are some, supposedly the Ashkenaic pronunciations give us the J sound, but classically, you could probably argue it's the Y sound, and instead of the V, it's the W sound, the Wah, not the Va. But again, that's distinctions in Hebrew pronunciation. But what's clear is those vowels shouldn't be there. So that's why, again, you get groups like Jehovah's Witnesses who right now have roughly 15 million members. They pick off people from existing Protestant churches to the tune that 3/4 of their new members are drawn from existing Protestant churches, and they use bad arguments like this, okay? That's why it's important, again, that our leaders have some Greek and Hebrew training so that when someone comes to you with an argument like this, you actually know what you're talking about and can explain and refute things from the original languages. Otherwise, you're going to be an incomplete apologist and an incomplete teacher. Because remember, part of your job is when people are in your church, are tossed to and fro by every wave and wind of doctrine. We're paying you as the expert to set people down back on that firm foundation. So again, don't neglect the study of the languages here. It's important. So significantly, let's give an exercise here. So it's Yahweh, but how'd you get from, again, Yahweh to Yehovah to Jehovah? Again, somebody without knowledge of the original languages sees this Yehovah, does a more Germanic pronunciation, and there it is. We've discovered the secret name of God, Jehovah, which they did not, okay? So that's why, again, in witnessing tools, it's significant that virtually no Jehovah's Witnesses know any Greek or Hebrew. So when you can show them your Hebrew grammar text and show them Kathib and Kare and show them all this stuff, it's pretty significant. You've planted a pretty good seed of doubt. Now, again, if you want to say Jehovah in your church, go ahead. Again, the old King James, a few places, has the word Jehovah in it. But more significantly, it's interesting, what we've got is Kathib and Kare in all of our English translations of the Bible, with very few exceptions. Why? Because go to your Old Testament and you'll see that there's two ways that Lord is spelled. There's capital L and lowercase O-R-D, and then there's Lord in all caps. Well, guess what? What happens is when Yahweh is in the Old Testament, the translators, the English translators, put Lord in all caps. So again, we're substituting the word Lord for the name Yahweh. So just know, every time you're coming across the Old Testament and you have Lord in all caps, that's an instance of the name Yahweh. So we continue this for various reasons, Kathib and Kare. Again, it's not proper, because we might diminish the importance of the name of God, that it becomes common instead of holy. Again, so there are good reasons to think about that. And there are good reasons for, again, you might have something in the text that's not appropriate for public teaching and preaching. And let me give you an example of that. Let's say you're using the King James, and you're preaching about, not cursing the people of God and prophets in the Old Testament. You're right around Numbers 20 through 22, and you got the story of what? Balaam and his donkey, okay? And so here you are, pounding the pulpit, trying to make an important point about not cursing God's people and being faithful. But then you make a mistake. You read the text and you say how Balaam's ass began to speak, okay? And then everyone from age 2 to about 80 starts giggling in the middle of your sermon. So what do you do at that point as a preacher? You use Kathib and Kare. Even though the text says Balaam's ass, you say Balaam's donkey, okay? That's modern Kathib and Kare, okay? Because this archaic understanding, word for donkey has other connotations in modern English. So we do that still today. So now for the final instance here on Yahweh and Jehovah and all of this, think about this, okay? Let's say we all decided as a church to say, you know what? We shouldn't say the name Jesus anymore because it's just too holy to pronounce. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to come up with a system like the Kathib and Kare, where every time the word Jesus appears in the New Testament, we're going to take the vowels from Messiah and put them on the word, on the consonants for Jesus. Now think about, and I have it in the syllabus, what would that look like? Well, we have Messiah, M-E-S-S-I-A-H, so we got an E, an I, and an A. So we put them together and say J-E-S-U-S, so J-S-S with the vowels, and here's the word you get, edgesauce. Okay? Now, if we looked in the Bible and we saw the word edgesauce, we all know that's not an English word. Okay? Because we speak English, we know the English language, that's a meaningless. What does that mean? That's gibberish. No, it's Kathib and Kare. It's telling you to say Messiah because the vowels are there in place of Jesus. And then 1,000 years later, of course, some group discovers that, we found the real name of Jesus. It wasn't really Jesus, it was edgesauce, okay? And then they start a group called Edgesauce's Witnesses, okay? Bad idea, okay? Don't do that. All right, we'll take a break now, and I want to come back. I want to look at some of the New Testament names for God and then some of the uses of name, because it's very important that when we think about the word name and the names of God, that we actually use them properly in ministry and in our understanding. Thanks.